Hello, back with another review of a Canadian short story in my Canadian short story project, where I am going through a group of stories that were curated by a Canadian writer, Kevin Hardcastle. 73 short stories to read while you're holed up or while you're holed up during the pandemic. Some of those stories are novel excerpts. I'm skipping those. Some of them in the time that he's kind of released his list of slipped behind paywalls. So it's probably not going to be 73 books. This is going to be number, I think, 16 of which, for me, the only reason this has significance for me is I bundled them up into a little Kindle Mobi document and mailed it to myself. So I've got a second one of these all queued up to go, but this is supposed to be the final bit of this clump of Canadian short stories, which I've actually kind of enjoyed for the most part. Some are more memorable than others. Some are a little bit clunky, but there's some really good ones in here. This one is Sprs by Thomas Dbzy, which I won't hold up because it's just the text. It's a story that's set in sort of 1950s, late 1950s, perhaps into the 1960s, British Columbia, just in a spot down from Powell River, on the west coast. I lived across the water on Vancouver Island in Courtney Comox, and from there you could take the ferry across to this, what even, this is like about 10 years ago, was still seemed like a very isolated community there. Can't imagine exactly how much more isolated it probably was at this time. This is Stillwater Bay is where they're looking. I guess they look out upon in these what look like they're kind of probably company-built shacks that the family can sit in for free. They're the only ones there. People don't really stay very long in them, but they have been staying in them a lot longer. They've been there for like 2 years, and they are Maris and Paul with their son and their daughter, who are twins, Tommy and Clara. And as the story develops, you come to understand that they are refugees from Hungary, from the communist, very repressive state of Hungary, where they escaped without telling anyone, even telling Paul's sister, who sort of stuck her neck out for them, who took one for the family. His family side of the family was at least very they were bourgeoisie before the thing, so they were basically given very low status. You wouldn't be able to get education. She took the bullet for the family and went to work at a factory, became a good proletariat, and thus was able to bring her brother in, and he was able to get a good education. And she's able to get an education as well, the sister, but they didn't tell her about it. And what's happened is the state has done the thing that they always do. These things is how best can we get at these people? How best can we make an example? They're punishing that sister who's left behind. She's lost her good job. She's lost her good house, living spot. She's living in a crap place with foul-mouthed, dirty workers. It's one of these really sad situations, and the husband seems like it's commented in the story a little bit baldly that he's basically used up all his bravery getting them out of the country and to Canada and set up here. And now that they're in this, what's not a great, it's definitely very company interior town, rough, tough. It's like he doesn't want to move from here, and that's sort of is the basis of the story. Is that Marissa, the wife, really does want to get out of here. And throughout the story, you start wondering if this is like a turn of the screw thing, where she is slowly kind of going crazy, or if, as Paul seems to come to believe, she's she's trying to manipulate him because they have there's a scene where he goes out to like kill one of the feral cats. There's always feral cats out here. He seems to be of the opinion that you have to kill one to make them respect you, which really sounds like somebody who's come from a repressive regime. That's the that kind of a mindset has unfortunately seeped into him, internalized. And But he goes out to do that, and when he comes back, the door's locked, and she's concocted this whole story of how we have to keep out the invaders, and he's like hammering on the door and it's like, oh no, it's the Russians, it's the Russians. Or she takes them through the entire history of Hungary, as he's trying to get into the room, and it's like, he is he is pissed off. It's never actually violent to them, but it's this, you can see that he's exasperated by this, and he sees this as just her way of trying to get back at him for them continuing to be here. Where you start kind of questioning her sanity, she gets very obsessed with recreating Budapest, especially like in the house, like using cans. Indeed, the cans are what she uses to represent spires. She was trained as an architect, and she's got obviously very intelligent woman, and she starts using that knowledge to recreate like Budapest, and then spreading it out like you have all of Hungary all around, in the kind of the bush area of this place. There's also there's some vivid imagery here where you're wondering exactly how close we are for her to be going to kind of insanity, because there's things like there's talk of they start yelling about bear at the beginning of this thing. There's a thing about bear, black bear. I'm assuming it's black bear, um, being there. See if I can flip to the right page without it. But the idea of like a black bear rearing up and a black bear, and they're being like glistening, almost like it's got stars, like it's almost like it's space, and Marissa feels like she is floating lost in space. And there's another scene where Paul shoots a cat, but they hear him crashing around, hunting around, and he comes back really angry, and it's like, yeah, he shot at a feral cat, but he's only wounded it, and she finds the feral cat, and it's wounded, and she puts it in a sack and drowns it, and it's strangely one of those things of animal cruelty where I looked at that and thought, oh, that feral cat is you, lady. That's like you getting, you're wounded. Are you going to end up drowned by the end of the story? And maybe not at the end of this story, but maybe further on, you get that sense of like she's in a bad spot. They find garbage in their the kids are always poking around, and they find buried garbage, which is, this is such an isolated place. It's probably, you have to ferry things in and out. It's like it would cost money. People just buried stuff. And this really kind of confuses her. Like, what kind of people would do this? It's like, what kind of people? It's like, how precious, how hard hand to mouth that Marissa and Paul are, and others probably, just especially post-war. It's like, how you'd hold on to everything, and this is something where there's like so many possessions that's like, okay, it's gonna be too expensive to transport, we're just gonna bury it. And she gets obsessed about like with her and getting the kids to like all dig it up. And but by the end of the story, he's like, yeah, he comes back and he's pissed, but he's like, yeah, there's civilizations upon civilizations buried under and under and under. We don't have to go anywhere, and that 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 is how that's how the story, the ends. He's like, he drew an X on the ground as if they could start digging right there, as if they didn't need to move an inch. Um, and and it goes, and it's like, your mother is right, he continued. The city goes on forever. this imagined city that she is constructed in the wilderness to kind of either to try and say to him, I'm going to go crazy if I'm out here, or to basically is a manifestation of her craziness. Your mother is right, he continued. The city goes on forever. His voice was hard with false conviction, the rage of teaching her a lesson. Tommy and Clara were in his arms now. They looked like three children babbling excitedly, billing Maris a prison out of her own glittering words. And it's like, I think actually the whole thing of me kind of identifying Paul with kind of a totalitarian thing is, it's like, yeah, we've gotten here and he is the totalitarian. They've escaped one kind of prison, and now they're unfortunately within this family unit are replicating it again in the wilderness of Canada. That same kind of thing of, and this woman is the captive, and her kids are the kind of the collaborators with the totalitarian husband. At least it's kind of one way to look at it. I mean, it's like she's trying to get her imagination to conjure up a city, a place to live, and he's turned it into, yes, here is the city where you're going to live for the rest of your life, or for as long as it goes before you go insane. So yeah, it's a really good little self-contained story that's saying a lot about just like, people coming to Canada, and unfortunately kind of, you run away, but you bring all that stuff with you, and unfortunately replicating that right back in the thing. And the spires are cans of food instead of the great architecture of Europe. So yeah, that's the final one in this section of Canadian short stories. But there are tons and tons of more short stories to read. I've got another little Mobi file to go through there, which I will bless you with on this channel. More videos later. Once again, that is Spires by Tomas Dbzy. Dbzy would be the New Jersey Dboises. Dbzy. The Hungarian Dboises. More videos later.